The Indianapolis Colts get absolutely blasted by the worst team in the NFL. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com, and I'm joining you solo today because I just had to get this episode up as quick as possible following what we just saw in that Colts game. So today we're going to talk about how the defense has their worst performance in maybe a decade with the Indianapolis Colts, how the Colts offense was able to string together some production late in this game, but it still wasn't enough to overcome the vaunted New York Giants. And first, we're going to talk about the main storylines of this game. So the biggest storyline, obviously, when it comes to this Indianapolis Colts team is finally this dumb team is eliminated from the playoffs. The Indianapolis Colts are officially out of the playoff hunt when it comes to the 2024 playoffs, obviously. So we don't have to worry about that by any means. We don't have to worry about the 2% tiebreakers and all these win-out scenarios and Carson Wentz winning with the Chiefs to get the Colts into the playoffs. We don't have to worry about any of that stuff when it comes to the Colts, obviously, because they lost to the New York Giants 45-33 here in Week 17. And honestly, this has to be the most embarrassing loss, aside from the 2021 loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's obviously the most embarrassing loss that we've seen from the Indianapolis Colts in the Chris Ballard era, maybe perhaps in the Indianapolis Colts history, like in their history of Indianapolis. That loss in 2021 to the Jacksonville Jaguars has to be the worst, but this is a close second. I mean, giving up 45 points to the worst offensive football, an offense that in their last month of play was not scoring 45 points total. They had not scored 45 points total in their last month of play. They put up 45 points in this game to beat the Indianapolis Colts. So typically in this first segment, we talk about Anthony Richardson. We talk about the big storylines of the game. But the big storyline from this game for me personally is fire everybody. Like, I'm not going to mince my words. I'm not going to be as, reserved as I typically am. I'm not going to be as soft as I typically am on this Indianapolis Colts team. It is time to fire everybody when you have a game like this. The Indianapolis Colts were essentially playing for their playoff lives in this game. And I'm not saying that they had great shot at making the playoffs in this game. Like, I'm not saying that, this was like a 90% playoff chance or something like that, like it was in 2021, but it was still essentially to keep their life support alive for the playoffs in 2024. And to show up like this against the worst team in football, a team that was scoring 14 points a game. They were scoring 14 points a game to allow 45 against them is an absolute embarrassing loss. This is pure embarrassment. And this doesn't even just go to Gus Bradley. Like, don't get me wrong. Gus Bradley, this is embarrassing. This is the most embarrassing Gus Bradley has ever been in his career. And he had the Jacksonville Jaguars winning 2 games this season. This is the most embarrassing day of Gus Bradley's career, and that says a lot. But this is not just Gus Bradley. This is the leaders on that defense. This is the leaders on this Colts team. This is the head coach, Shane Steichen. This is on Chris Ballard, the general manager. This is as embarrassing as it gets. It's one thing to lose to the New York Giants. It's another thing to give up 45 points. 45 points to the New York Giants with Drew Lock as their quarterback. Drew Lock is the quarterback. They had Jake Kubas out there, and I love Jake Kubas as a draft prospect, as an undrafted free agent, potentially to the Indianapolis Colts. But Jake Kubas is out there as right guard in this game. They had Tyrone Tracy at running back. This was just embarrassing. I have no clue where you go from here with this Indianapolis Colts team, because even if you decide, oh, this is just one-off bad game with the Colts team, we were 8 wins, we were so close. Like if they win next week, we're 8 wins, we're so close to the playoffs, blah, 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 blah. Like they always do every single offseason. How do you overlook this game? How do you overlook what just happened here in this game? They gave up 45 points to Drew Lock. And it's not like Drew Lock was on an all-time heater. Like this wasn't a Nick Foles versus New England Patriots Super Bowl type of performance. This wasn't a Joe Flacco Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl run type performance. This was Drew Lock throwing checkdowns to Malik Neighbors, throwing checkdowns to Darius Slayton, checkdowns to Wan'Dale Robinson, and they were resulting in these big-time touchdowns. Drew Lock had a near-perfect passer rating in this game. I mean, this is outright just crazy. I mean, I have the numbers here. Let me go to Drew Lock's numbers here. Drew Lock finished 17 of 23 for 309 yards passing with 4 touchdowns and 5 total touchdowns in this game. I mean, how do you get around that? And it's not even just like saying, oh, if we get rid of Gus Bradley, everything's fine. If you get rid of Gus Bradley, this is still the players that allowed Drew Lock to have a near perfect passer rating in an NFL game. Like this isn't just Gus Bradley. This is the players on defense. This is the head coach. This is the players on offense for having a piss poor game as well. This is the general manager for putting together this type of roster. I mean, I don't really know where you go with this. 45-33 against the worst team in football. Last year, the Colts were not a great football team last season with Gardner Minshew at quarterback and with a lot of, weaknesses on that Colts roster last season. But still, when they played the worst teams in football last year in 2023, they beat them. They didn't have a great game against the Carolina Panthers in 2023. But they still beat them by 2 scores. This season, every bad team they've played, they've beaten barely by 1 score, or they lose by 2 scores like they did against the New York Giants today. I mean, where do you go from here? There's no optimism going into 2025. Anthony Richardson took a major step back. Shane Steichen has taken a major step back this season. The defense, despite their really positive EPA per play, especially against good teams, has not been a good defense this season. The offense has been a major liability this season. The special teams unit, oh my gosh, they have been a train wreck this season. Outside of Matt Gay within 50 yards, the special teams unit has been a complete train wreck this season. So where do you go here from the Indianapolis Colts perspective? You don't go anywhere. You don't have star players on this team. Your star players are maybe Quentin Nelson and maybe DeForest Buckner, who both those players didn't show up today. And you don't have any other star players on this team whatsoever. You don't have a baseline with this team because they can barely beat bad teams. They get blown out by the New York Giants, who are the worst team in football, and they can't do anything on Sundays. So where do you go from here? I have long had this opinion this season where you really could not convince the Indianapolis Colts fan base to bring back Chris Ballard for another season, even if they finished at 9-8 and had a good final part of the season. But right now, when you lose to the New York Giants like this, how do you convince any single player or any single person in Indianapolis that Chris Ballard is the man for the job? How do you convince any single person who roots for this Colts team that Chris Ballard can right the ship? I think you could have maybe made a case if you finished 9-8 and just missed the playoffs by 1 game. Oh, darn, we were so close. If we just had a little bit better quarterback play from Anthony Richardson, we were a playoff team. No, you can't use that excuse now. You gave up 45 points to the New York Giants. Imagine if this team was actually in the playoffs. Imagine if they had to play Buffalo in the first round of the playoffs. How many points are they giving up to Josh Allen? So, yeah, I don't even know what to say about this team anymore. I know I just rambled for about 10 minutes there, but this is just pure embarrassing football from the Indianapolis Colts, and we're going to break it down even more going forward. So coming up, I'm going to talk about the offense and how, yes, there were a couple players that stood out and did some good things, but overall, this was not a good game from the Colts offense. But first, did Rocket Money help you guys find any subscriptions that you found that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them down. And it's like having a personal assistant for finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can find and grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Personally, guys, I've actually used Rocket Money quite a bit to cancel all the subscriptions I had in the past on like streaming services, food apps, and stuff like that I just don't use anymore. Rocket Money has come in clutch to cancel those and help me avoid those phone calls that I just personally don't want to make. So Rocket Money has been super clutch for me. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on today. rocketmoney.com/locked on. All right, Locked On Colts everydayers. We are back talking about this absolutely dreadful Indianapolis Colts team. I mean, look, we'll start with some positives here. Talk about this Colts offense. Alec Pierce is an absolute monster. Alec Pierce has already hit his career highs in receiving yards, hit his career highs in receiving touchdowns. Had another game today where he had 6 receptions for 122 yards and a touchdown. Alec Pierce is awesome. I mean, how many times have we had a game this season where Jake and I have come on here after the game and been like, look, the Indianapolis Colts stink, but hey, Alec Pierce is awesome. Alec Pierce is a really good player. I mean, I feel like we've had multiple games this season. I mean, the Jacksonville Jaguars game in week 6 obviously was the biggest one that showcases that, but yeah, Alec Pierce, really good football player, vertical player down the field, makes some big plays, drew a pass interference that gave the Colts a touchdown before the half. Alec Pierce, just an outstanding player there. And Michael Pittman Jr., I think, had one of his better games of the season too, 109 yards in this game with a touchdown, was catching everything thrown his way, made himself available for Joe Flacco. I think he did some good things there. Jonathan Taylor, despite not having the efficiency on offense, still had 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. Helped me out in my fantasy football championship game today, so I can't complain too much about Jonathan Taylor in regards to his ability as a runner. But let's talk about the negatives with this Colts offense. Joe Flacco is certainly not a starting quarterback in the NFL at this point, and I think we all knew that. There's a reason why he's a backup for the Colts and why the Colts were his only option this offseason. He's certainly just not good enough to start for a team. And we can talk about how Anthony Richardson should have been out there with soreness or back spasms or whatever the heck it was. I'm not a medical person, so I can't talk about what's going on with him medically, but certainly we can have concerns with a player who's had 4 to 5 injuries in the last 2 seasons where running the football is a big aspect of his game. But Anthony Richardson wasn't out there today, and it certainly hurt the offense. It hurt the rushing attack. Jonathan Taylor had 125 yards rushing today, but had 3.9 yards per carry and wasn't particularly efficient running the football. And I think that is because Anthony Richardson was not on the field. They were coming off of one of their greatest rushing performances ever against the Tennessee Titans. And to have, I mean, again, 125 yards rushing is good, but having it at 3.9 yards a carry is not good. So again, you see that Anthony Richardson aspect there, and having him where he's not on the field certainly hurts the running game. So take that for what you will there. The offensive line was not particularly great in this game. Mark Lewinsky is a veteran player who has certainly been better than Dalton Tucker, but hasn't been that much of an upgrade. Bernhard Raimann had one of his worst games of the season. Matt Gonsalves was beat constantly by Brian Burns in this game. It just wasn't a great day from the offensive line. And we go to the tight end room. Kylan Granson had a couple nice catches in this game, but the tight end room, for the most part, yet again, was completely quiet. Didn't really do much whatsoever and was more so a negative than a positive. in this game. And then you go to some of the other wide receivers, like, yes, Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce and Josh Downs did their thing. Those are good players. We understand that those three guys are good players who are going to make plays happen when they are on the field. But then you look at like an A.D. Mitchell where, again, a big drop in this game, a couple other plays where he didn't make a play on the ball. And it's like, he's got to figure that out eventually. He was a top 55 pick. I think he was just outside the top 50. So he's going to have to figure that out by next season. And then let's talk about Jonathan Taylor a little bit, guys, because Jonathan Taylor, a fantastic runner of the football. But aside running the football, how good is Jonathan Taylor for this Colts team? Because we saw multiple plays in this game where, again, when he's outside of his role of running the football, you see mistakes with Jonathan Taylor. You see when he has to be a pass catcher, you see drops. You see him not looking for the football, like on that swing pass just before halftime. Like, wide open, completely uncovered. You have to know the situation. Why is he not looking back for the football in there? And why is the ball hitting off of his helmet and nearly resulting in an interception? Like, that is just inexcusable for a player making as much money as Jonathan Taylor is making. You go to the 2-point conversion attempt to Jonathan Taylor, where the Colts draw up a wide open touchdown for Jonathan Taylor to walk in on that 2-point conversion attempt, a hook and ladder type play, and Taylor just drops the ball, inexplicably drops the ball. And again, we've seen this too many times from Jonathan Taylor this season. Yes, he's going to finish this season with 1,400 yards rushing and nearly 5 yards per carry, which is awesome. Like, Jonathan Taylor, as a runner, is a fantastic football player for this Colts team. But whenever he's asked to do anything besides run the football, we see these warts that hurt the Colts football team. And we even see these mental mistakes that hurt the Colts football team. When you go back to the Denver Broncos game, the Colts would have been in the playoff picture even more if he doesn't drop the ball at the 1-yard line, obviously against the Denver Broncos. You go to this week and not turning around for the football in a passing play, dropping the ball in a 2-point conversion attempt when it was a walk-in conversion easily. Like, these are the plays that kill your football team and take points off the board. And it's one thing if it's like, we killed Tyler Goodson last season when he dropped that 4th down conversion attempt, but he's on a veteran minimum contract. It's one thing to kill a player on a veteran minimum contract. But when a player is making what Jonathan Taylor is making on a yearly basis, around 14, 15, $16 million per year, you can't be making these mistakes. These mistakes are too frequent with Jonathan Taylor. And again, no matter how good he is running the football, had a 30-yard touchdown in this game, was a big part of the 300-yard rushing performance last week. Like, he is a great runner of the football. But these mistakes can't happen for a player making top of the position money that Taylor is making. So I don't want to spend this whole episode post-game just ranting about Jonathan Taylor, because he was far from the biggest issue in this game. But we are seeing too many issues from a player that is getting paid like a superstar. When you are getting paid like a superstar, you need to perform like a superstar. We are seeing Quentin Nelson and DeForest Buckner outside of this game. I don't know where DeForest Buckner was in this game, but we are seeing those players at least perform like superstars. We are not seeing Jonathan Taylor perform like a superstar when it matters the most. When the Colts need points, superstars get points. Michael Pittman Jr. got the Colts points in this game. Alec Pierce, who's on a rookie contract, got the Colts points in this game. Jonathan Taylor, when they needed that 2-point conversion, dropped the football. And it simply can't happen when you're getting paid as much as Jonathan Taylor is getting paid. But yeah, it's just, it's part of this team, man. Like, the culture of this team is so bad. Where this team is heading is so bad. The leadership on this team is so bad. And I don't know where to go from here with this Colts roster. So coming up, we're going to talk about the Colts defense, where I'm going to be even more brutal on the Colts defense. I know in the Colts offense, I had to be particular about Jonathan Taylor because his mistakes certainly cost the Colts. I didn't even talk about the 3rd down play where he ran out of bounds a yard short when he easily had a conversion on 3rd down. So, yeah, a lot of Jonathan Taylor stuff on offense. But let's talk about this Colts defense coming up and how Giving up 45 points to Drew Lock needs to be the nail in the coffin for Gus Bradley and for half the starters on this defense going forward. So yeah, guys, I'm back. Locked On Colts Everydayers. We are back talking about the Colts defense now. So Locked On Colts Everydayers, I appreciate you guys sticking around this long. And yeah, man, Drew Lock, 17 of 23 for 309 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and 1 rushing touchdown. So Drew Lock accounted for over 300 yards of offense and 5 touchdowns, coming off a game where he threw 2 pick sixes against the Atlanta Falcons. Where do you go from here with this Colts defense? I mean, I genuinely think the cornerback room has been better than what we expected, but the defensive line has been a train wreck this season. If you're looking at this Colts defensive line, Leatu Latu has been a disappointment this season. Kwity Paye has been a disappointment this season. Dio Dangbo has been a disappointment this season. DeForest Buckner has been injured for a lot of the season, so it's hard to call him a disappointment, but he hasn't lived up to DeForest Buckner standards. The linebacker room has been a major disappointment this season. The safety room, I actually think Nick Cross has performed better than expected, but still been hit or miss in a lot of games. But Julian Blackmon has been a major disappointment this season. So where do you go with this Colts defense? Where do you go? Because for me personally, I don't think any of the free agents on the Colts defense deserves to be re-signed. I don't think Julian Blackmon deserves to come back. I don't think EJ Speed deserves to come back. I don't think multiple guys on this defense deserve to come back because they're simply not good enough. They're not good enough to play on a starting defense in the NFL. And yes, Gus Bradley is a big concern. Gus Bradley is certainly a concern when it comes to this defense. But when you're watching what's happening on Sundays, when you're watching games like this and guys can't tackle, like guys simply are not tackling the ball carrier, like, yes, that is on the defensive coordinator because you are the manager of that defense. You are the person who's in charge of that defense, and you're supposed to get these guys in the right fundamentals to make plays on the ball and finish plays. But at the end of the day, like guys like EJ Speed, Julian Blackmon, Zaire Franklin, Nick Cross, Jalen Jones, like these are guys who have been playing football their entire life, and they can't tackle on Sundays. Like, this is not just a defensive coordinator mistake. This is also a player mistake. These guys are not finishing plays. They are soft in the biggest games that matter. And it's just absolutely embarrassing on Sundays. This Colts defense this season, this is the most fascinating thing. And this is why I think this Colts defense is one of the most interesting defenses I've ever seen in my life. This Colts defense, if you filter out all their games against bottom 10 offenses, if you just take those out of the equation, this Colts defense is a top 10 defense in football in terms of EPA per play, success rate, turnover percentage. Like, this is one of the best defenses in football whenever they play non-bottom 10 offenses. But the second they play a bad offense, when they play against the Tennessee Titans, when they play against the Jacksonville Jaguars, when they play against New England Patriots, when they play against the New York Giants, they become this absolute abomination of a defense that simply can't stop anything. And that speaks to the leadership of this defense. It is embarrassing. It is absolutely embarrassing that you can give your offense a shot to win against the Minnesota Vikings. You can give your offense a shot to win against the Detroit Lions. They held the Detroit Lions to 24 points. Not many teams have held the Detroit Lions 24 points this season. They forced multiple interceptions against Josh Allen this season. This defense is capable of good football. But the second they play against an inferior opponent, an opponent they think they can take it easy against, they get bludgeoned. They get absolutely bludgeoned by the Mason Rudolphs. They get bludgeoned by the Drew Locks. They get bludgeoned by, I mean, I don't want to put Trevor Lawrence in this conversation, but Trevor Lawrence with that Jacksonville Jaguars game. You could even go back to last season, Taylor Heineke, Jake Browning with the Cincinnati Bengals. That is what this defense is. they let down against bad opponents. And that is a culture issue. That is a player issue. That is a coaching issue. That is an organizational issue. You can't have teams that do this. The marker of a good football team is when you play bad teams, you beat the hell out of them. You beat the hell out of bad football teams. And when you play against good football teams, you keep it close and it's more of a coin toss if you win or lose. That is what the good football teams do. You look at the Buffalo Bills. When the Buffalo Bills play a bad football team, they absolutely kill a bad football team. But when they play against a good football team, they keep it close and they either win or they lose. It comes up down to a coin toss. When you look at the Indianapolis Colts, it's a coin toss against the bad football teams, and it's a beatdown against the good football teams. And even today, you get blowouts against bad football teams. I mean, this game wasn't even remotely close against Drew Lock and the New York Giants. So where do you go from here with this Colts team? I know I'm divulging a little bit from this defensive segment to talk about just the Colts team in general, but you have a quarterback you took in the top 5 who has regressed in almost every metric, who has had more injuries this season, who has been benched, who's needed a wake-up call. You have not had good play from your young quarterback in year 2. When you had good play from him in year 1, your head coach has consistently bungled PR opportunities, constantly putting Anthony Richardson under fire by calling his back spasms soreness. You're going to kill him with that. What are you doing, Shane Steichen? Completely bungling everything revolving around the benching of Anthony Richardson. Shane Steichen was a complete mess with that. Had multiple opportunities this season where he blew it in games like the Houston Texans game where the interception before halftime. Why are you throwing the football there? So Shane Steichen's taken a step back. Anthony Richardson's taken a step back. This defense completely underplays opponents, does not play good against bad opponents, plays well against top opponents, but terrible against bad opponents. And this offense has gone from an offense last year where Shane Steichen feels like he got a lot out of a Gardner Minshew-led offense. Got Gardner Minshew into the Pro Bowl last season. Gardner Minshew into the Pro Bowl last season, to now where we're at, where this offense is going to finish as a bottom 10 offense in football. I know they scored 33 points today, but again, against the New York Giants, we're not talking about against a juggernaut of a defense here. So where do you go with this team going forward? You have major holes on defense. You probably need a new defensive coordinator. You probably need a new head coach. Probably need a new offensive coordinator. Probably need a new quarterback going forward. Where do you go from here with this Colts team? And the one thing I keep coming back to is the Colts have a general manager in year 8. He's in year 8 of being a general manager, and they're going to finish with 8 wins at the most, coming off of a 12-point loss against the worst team in football. Why are you bringing back that general manager? So I know that I like to keep it reserved. I like to keep it relatively calm on this show. I know I've been kind of explosive today because this episode is called for explosiveness, obviously following a massive loss to the New York Giants. But I'm gonna quite frankly, I'm gonna just be blunt here. Jim Irsay, it is time to move on from Chris Ballard. It is time. This build has failed. The Colts have brought back every player, essentially every single player from the 2021 team that blew it in Week 18 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which were the worst team in football. They have brought back every single player that was on that 2022 team that simply sucked in 2022. They have continually brought back every single player. It is time to fire Chris Ballard. It is time to move on from all of them. And I ultimately think Anthony Richardson can be a fine quarterback one day. I really think he can. I think Shane Steichen can be a fine head coach one day. But I will sacrifice both of them to get rid of Chris Ballard. I know Chris Ballard personally is an average to below average general manager. I don't think he is the worst of the worst when it comes to general managers. But for me personally, I am fine with taking the chance at getting worse at general manager to take the chance at potentially getting better at it. I don't think Chris Ballard can do much better than what he's at right now, which is average to below average general manager. It is time to move on. It's been 8 years. We can't use the Andrew Luck retirement as an excuse anymore. We can't use Frank Reich as an excuse anymore. We can't use Anthony Richardson being 10 years old as an excuse anymore. This team is not capable of competing with real NFL teams. So it's time to move on. Jim Irsay, please, it is time to move on from Chris Ballard. Let's reset this dang thing and start over. It is time to start over for the Indianapolis Colts. But yeah, guys, that is what I have. My unfiltered thoughts here. Jake is not here to rein me in. So obviously I'm a little bit just off the wagon today. I appreciate you guys listening. And I'm trying to scroll through your comments as I'm talking, but it is a ton of comments. But I do appreciate all you guys tuning in to today's episode of Locked On Colts. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Next, go find Locked On NFL. First, the Madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. And then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly and get that insider scoop, follow the link in our show notes. And if you guys don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, or at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube where we listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.